So this is the very long-awaited feature film of The Flash. It was first introduced in Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, way back in 2015 or so. His character was first in that. He was also in Justice League and Zack Snyder's Justice League. And this project has been like 10 years in gestation. Like, it's changed hand, multiple directors. It was scrapped at one point. It was Ezra Miller helped to revive it. Finally got attached to be directed by Andy Muschietti. And it's finally here after like nearly 10 years. So our story is Barry Allen, the Flash. He is trying to get his father out of prison, who has been kind of framed for the murder of his mother. This is really like origin backstory stuff that we haven't really heard of until now. At one point, Barry realizes he can run so fast that he can run back in time, and that he thinks, I can change the past and I can save my mom's life. I can get my dad out of prison. Ben Affleck's Batman makes a brief appearance, says, "No, don't do this. This is a terrible idea. You don't know what the consequences could be." He does it anyways. He manages to save his parents, but in the meantime, he corrupts the universe he's in, and kind of creates a universe without superheroes, and runs into his alternate self, runs into a new Batman that we've seen in the trailer, played by Michael Keaton, resuming the role over 30 years since 1989 when he originally played the Batman. Up is down, left is right. Everything is wrong with the universe, and they have to try and fix it and make things right. And Barry has to try and return to his past. And that's our setup. Zach, what do you think?
So I think a lot of people are skeptical about The Flash. I myself was skeptical about The Flash. You can go back and listen on this very show when we joked about Ezra Miller getting a scriptwriter for The Flash to try to get it off the ground, because DC was shaky for the last couple years now, and this movie was not a sure thing. Of course, it finally gets made. There's a whole lot of controversy that comes on the other side of it, courtesy of Ezra. But now here we are. We have The Flash. And I think like it would be easy to say this movie's not going to be good. It'd be easy to say, hey, I don't want to support it from personal reasons. Like, I totally get that. Respect. But on its surface, like on its face, I think The Flash is a good comic book movie. I don't think it's bad. I've been really surprised at some people saying it's like horrifically bad and oh my god, it's so terrible and the worst comic book film. And I've also been surprised at hearing people say it's the best comic book movie ever. It wasn't James Gunn, but it was, I forget who exactly said, like, this is the best superhero movie of all time.
David Zaslav said that.
Yeah, the CEO of Warner Discovery. Very convenient for him to say his new superhero feature is the best superhero feature ever. It's not. It's definitely got problems, but it's a surprisingly fun script. The time travel aspects of The Flash and how they work, combined with like a really bouncy screenplay, makes for a movie that moves really fast. No pun intended. For a 2.5 hour runtime, like you wouldn't know it. It's snappy. It works. There's lots of action. There's fun set pieces. Like, solid comic book feature. Like, I have few complaints about The Flash. Andy, what'd you think?
I thought it was a mixed bag. There are things that work about it, and there's, I think, a whole lot that doesn't. And this is coming from someone who, I'm a huge comic book fan. I read a lot of comics. I'm the target demographic for this, and I was more or less kind of disappointed. The second half of this, I think, is better than the first half. When Barry first goes back in time and runs into young Barry, it's basically Back to the Future with superheroes, except it's way less interesting. And there's this whole weird, like, Three Stooges slapstick comedy happening like the first hour, and it's frustrating because you know what the Flash does. The Flash is fast, and somehow you're having to retread an origin story. Be like, well, Barry, these are your powers. You can't just run. You need a suit, and it's like you're somehow going backwards in this movie to kind of tell a bit of an origin story. And I thought that first hour was really dull. It gets a lot better when Batman shows up about halfway through Michael Keaton's Batman, and we eventually run into Supergirl. It gets a little bit more interesting, but it's got a lot of problems. And I think when you're depending so much on characters like Batman. Like you have two Batman men in this movie and Supergirl, and it's like, is this even a Flash movie anymore? So there were things that worked and things that didn't.
Yeah, that was one of the things that was so surprising about the trailer for me. There hasn't been a proper Flash origin movie in the DC universe, so it's not really clear how this Flash got their powers, but he's been around. He was in Justice League, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice maybe shows up. I don't know, some other one. And watching the trailer for this, yeah, it's like half a Flash trailer, but then it's like half from Michael Keaton's Batman. They got the Danny Elfman score. He says, "Let's get nuts," right? Like it's got all the trimmings of classic Batman. So the trailer is like split down the middle. On one half it's a Flash trailer, and the other half it's Batman. Batman's on the poster, Batman's in the teasers, like Batman's all over the place. Additionally, a little bit of Superman mixed in there, right? With the introduction of Sasha Cale as not Superman, but like a multiverse alternate version of Superman, right? Functionally, our warrior from Krypton. All three of them get lots of screen time. They make it a big effort to be like, look at all these different properties we're bringing in for fun and celebrating like superhero stuff. And like it's hard to appreciate that because this is the studio that made Space Jam 2, like the most soulless marketing gimmick like attempts at features. Space Jam 2 more so than Space Jam 1. Watching this movie, like you can't like, it's fun to see these characters interact, sure, but you definitely like realize a lot of it is just like box office bait, right? Like just like whatever gets people in seats. We're gonna put Batman in there, and we're gonna have Superman in there. They've been doing this since Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, right? Don't give Batman a proper origin movie. Just jump right into the big fight. And that's a bit of a thing here, but I should say one of the things that works really well is all of these like actors and actresses. Ezra Miller is good in this movie, like tragically good. If you wanted us to slam Ezra Miller, like I have bad news. Ezra Miller's fine in this movie. They play two different Barrys, two different Barry Allens. Interacting with one another. One's a little younger, one's a little older. One's like, cool, dude, great, like all thumbs up. The other one's like, I got to figure this thing out and get on top of this. This dynamic that Flash has that is most effectively seen in, I think, Spider-Man is Flash is strong when they're doing their superpower thing, but Flash is weak when they're a human, right? Barry's always running late. Barry's never on time to things, which is funny and comedic because Barry is the Flash, right? And can move very quickly. And it creates this like weird like tick of a person who's like nervous and like twitchy and has a big appetite, and like Flash ends up being like a very likable character. Like it's very well done. I know there's been lots of comics and TV series, so they've got a lot of room to draw on, but like the core conceit of Flash, Batman, Supergirl, all solid, all fun characters.
Yeah, once we get everyone kind of together, it's a more interesting movie. They all, like, Batman has a lot of personality, like Michael Keaton's. He kind of has this very smug Batman, which I like. Sasha Cale doesn't have enough to do in this movie. Tragically underutilized, but she's great. And she has a few really good lines that she delivers with like Shakespearean seriousness. It's really great stuff. To me, Barry Allen's the least interesting person in his own movie, and it's because they can't really decide what kind of character they want him to be. He's kind of doing a little bit of mentorship because he's supposed to be older Barry, helping younger Barry, but he also, I don't know, he doesn't have enough of a defined personality, and that's what really in the movies, that's what our superheroes are really defined as. When you look at Marvel, when you think of Captain America or Iron Man or Thor, they all have very distinct personalities that outside of like their superhero abilities, and Barry's just sort of a wet blanket, and I don't know why they made him just like the butt of the joke, and he's just kind of like a walking moron. And it's like, I mean, they don't write him like that in the comics. Like he's on the level with everyone else. Like, I don't know. He's like a child, and they decided to do that with not just this movie, but all of the DCEU. And I don't know, just kind of a wet blanket. But the action scenes, I think, are where this really works kind of the best.
Yeah, the action in Flash is a lot of fun. It does come at the expense of some grating CGI. We should talk about that in a minute. But for what it's worth, in a 2.5 hour feature, like you've got to keep people interested, right? And you got to have good ebb and flow of like high intensity moments and then like low relaxing moments, so people can get up and get a popcorn refill or go to the bathroom or whatever, right? Like you can kind of breathe. And Flash does a really good job of moving through excitement because you've got time travel. And who doesn't love time travel, right? Like I'm a sucker for Back to the Future. I love those movies. Like, and this movie not only is very much like Back to the Future, but like directly references it. Like they talk about it at one point. And like the time travel stuff gives you the opportunity to upset setting for your viewer. So people watching don't know what time we're in, don't know what place we're in, don't really know what setting we're in or what we're going to find next, right? Around every corner is a mystery box or anything could happen. With that, of course, you also get like the multiverse, which gets complicated. Like I was almost expecting to see the Marvel CGI multiverse tree, like the white like tree with a bunch of strands that they got that they're putting in like every movie now to be like the multiverse. This doesn't quite do that. It's visually distinct. But you get a lot of moments of like traversal through time, which Barry does with this like running thing where he kind of goes in reverse. Not even really explained. On top of that, you get a bit of an origin stuff with how Barry got his powers. That's exciting. And of course, a big battle at the end, right? You got to have the big something at the end when General Zod returns from well, I guess arrives on this alternate multiverse Earth that Barry's on, and they have to try to team up and figure that out. I feel okay saying that because it's in the trailer, not to be spoilery, but I think we need to talk about the CGI probably because I've heard a lot of people roasting it for that.
Some of the CGI in this is atrociously bad. And it starts from the beginning. Like there's a big action sequence at the opening where the Flash has to rescue people from a falling building. He rescues some babies, and it's just like the most unconvincing thing you could ever see. It doesn't even look like a car. Like, please just do this in animation. Be fully animated because it just looks so bad and unconvincing.
Yeah, it's funny. I was reminded during that sequence of one of the Sonic the Hedgehog movies. I think the first one. Because there's a sequence in there where Sonic has to like dodge a bunch of missiles as he's running up a mountain or something. He's running up a building, and he has to, so he like it goes in slow-mo and he ends up jumping around on these things. But it's like so much more fun and a lot shorter. And this movie, meanwhile, the sequence is like way too long, and somehow you make Flash saving a dozen fallen babies dull, which is like hard to do. I do think it's imaginative, like in the right places. But yeah, some of the CGI is laughably bad. Just this opening run sequence, I literally laughed out loud in my theater because I couldn't believe how bad it was. I was like, oh no, and I didn't want to go into this movie ready to riff on it, right? Like I was not ready to rip on The Flash when I walked in. I had low expectations, but I was not planning on like audibly laughing like at some of the CGI. Like too big in scope, I think. They would have to spend another $500 million like to make the CGI in this movie look awesome. But
well,
yeah,
you have to make some decisions, and one of them is like, yeah, it's cool to see the slow-mo stuff, but you should do that very, very rarely. For the most part, the Flash should just be moving fast. You should just see him moving around at super speed, saving people or stopping the building from falling, that sort of thing. We don't need to see it in slow-mo unless you're going to do it really well, like Quicksilver, I guess, in the X-Men movies. There's like literally it's just one scene that is phenomenal that kind of happens in each movie, and they only do it once, and that's all you need. The rest of the time you just know he moves fast, and that's what they definitely should have done more of here. But it looks bad, and it looks bad the longer it goes. Like there's some sequences later in the film that it's like, what are you guys doing? What did you pay for? And part of it, it's like you're animating people instead of just using the character. Like you can tell that like Michael Shannon's face is just being like put over a body double or a stunt double, and a lot of it just looks bad. Or when you're trying to like look at multiple timelines and multiverse, and it's like you could have just gotten the real actors and cut pasted whatever to make it look like a dozen different timelines, but they just try to animate all these things and it just looks so bad in the CGI.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I love the most about the old Back to the Future movies is they're like special effects marvels, right? Like Rob Zemeckis making those features. He would go on to do Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is widely regarded as like one of the best in practical effects, like for special effects, like before using computer animation, really. This movie tries to have that same effect, but it just goes for the computer animation. And there's a lot of scenes where like young Barry is behind old Barry, and like if you're looking, he's out of focus. If you're looking at him, like his face is pasted on there, man. Like it's not. It's not that deep. They didn't do any like split diopter frames or anything to like put Ezra Miller in there twice, and they didn't have him like grow his hair out over 4 months to shoot the other side. Like they just, they use wigs and CGI, and like it's fine. It's fine. Like I'm looking for those things, right? I watch a lot of movies. Like I don't think the average moviegoer is. I think the average moviegoer would have a really fun time with this, but people just seem really mid on it. Like people seem really mid on Flash, and it's not great. It's not a great comic book movie, but it's good. Like I think Flash is fine. I really do.
It's very. It leans really heavily on its gimmicks. Like I said, this feels more like a Batman movie or a team up movie than it does a Flash movie. And one thing that Lord Miller of producers of the Lego Movie and Across the Spider-Verse most recently were quoted in saying, the superhero movies can't just be about cameos and Easter eggs. Like you can't build a whole movie or a whole franchise or a whole universe on that. And they're absolutely right. And that's exactly what this movie feels like. It's like, oh, if we just throw enough shiny objects on the screen, people will come. And it's showing that, A, that's not happening. You have to have a really compelling story like Across the Spider-Verse that uses the multiverse and these variants of the characters to tell a really compelling and engaging story instead of just like shiny fan service.
Yeah. I think it does a lot right, but Andy's ultimately right. Like it feels like it's in the later half of like weary, fatigued superhero movies. Like it doesn't feel particularly fresh. It doesn't feel particularly new. I think there's a lot working for it, but yeah, it feels like it should have come out like pre-COVID. This is not, I think, what people are looking for. I think they want something exciting, something different, right? Like Spider-Verse. I think Phil Lord and Chris Miller are right on the nose. That being said, like I think it does things well. It's just, I don't know. I think people are tired of it. Like I don't, I don't think general audiences want this. Any other thoughts on this before recommendations, Andy? I had one other thing. I want to talk about the soundtrack, but what do you got? Anything?
One thing that I had heard someone say was that this movie can't decide whether it wants to be a time travel movie or a multiverse movie, and it's a little bit of both, and kind of not doing either one super well.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I like what it does, but I'm a sucker for time travel movies. I don't know. Yeah, I was surprised at how much I liked it, but I don't. No, like any movie, it's not perfect. Andy, would you recommend? Oh, the soundtrack. Shoot, that was one other thing I wanted to say. I was just looking up who the music's by. Benjamin Wallfish. Surprisingly fun soundtrack. Like high beats per minute, moves really fast, even in the slow bits. He formerly composed Blade Runner 2049 and It and The Invisible Man and Shazam. Like lots of great work out of Benjamin Wallfish. I think The Flash is a good one. I think it's solid. I don't know why. I think a lot of those sequences when he's like running in slow motion, the music's moving way faster than he is. Like that's surprisingly inspired. That's somebody who looked at this and thought, well, I want to get creative and do something special. And I think, I don't know. I think there's something cool about the music in this movie. That's just a small aside. Andy, would you recommend? Oh, any thoughts on that? Before
Just that I enjoyed like the throwback calls to the Batman '89 themes.
Yeah.
Originally by
Danny Elfman.
Thank you.
They got that score in there for sure, baby. Like absolutely.
Yeah, which is another. A lot of this movie's kind of nostalgia bait, which like it's cool to see on screen, but like I'm not gonna go back and watch it again. I'll just watch the clips on YouTube.
Yeah, at the runtime, like a few will, I think. Andy, would you recommend The Flash?
I would say only for hardcore comic book aficionados. If you're really into the comic book films and you read comic books, you'll enjoy it for what it is. There's a lot of Easter eggs in there. If you're at all having a little bit of superhero fatigue, I would say probably skip this one or save it for streaming. Maybe it's definitely not must go out and see. And it's not even, unfortunately, it's not even a big, like, must see it on the big screen experience either. In fact, a lot of the CGI probably will look better on a smaller screen digitally. So kind of soft pass, I think.
Yeah, I disagree. I would say go see it in a theater if you can. I think it's a fun time. Like for a comic book script, I think it's bouncy. The idea is relatively unique. You could certainly do worse, like for comic book live action features, even with the CGI. Like, I think it's fun. I had a few chuckles. I would say go see Flash in a theater if you can swing it, or just wait for it to show up on HBO. Like, you can already see like the HBO or the Max front page, right? With like, see the Flash, like play now streaming. Like, it's coming soon for sure. So we'll see. With that, we normally would be segueing into our middle segment in the show. Normally we do 2 reviews, and then we'd have one that's like a segment where we talk about new trailers, right? Upcoming things to see, or the death of cinema, something that's hurting the industry that we think is worth highlighting. But this week, we're moving right on to review number 2. It's going to be Transformers: Rise of the Beasts.